When we talk about the price America paid for misjudging India, it begins with a single, simple mistake: underestimating what India could become. For far too long, Washington saw New Delhi as a junior partner, a country to be managed, influenced, nudged in the right direction, rather than a nation with its own vision, its own ambitions, and its own power. And that mindset came with a cost. You see, for decades, the United States assumed India would always play catch up. Yes, it was the world's largest democracy. Yes, it had a massive population. But in Washington's view, it wasn't quite ready to sit at the table with the big players. America saw India as a market, a potential ally, a counterweight to China, but not as an independent global leader. And that miscalculation shaped policy decisions that would later come back to haunt us. While we were debating whether India was ready for prime time, India was already building its own future, quietly, steadily, strategically. India was investing in its technology sector, modernizing its infrastructure, and strengthening its defense capabilities. It wasn't waiting for permission. It wasn't waiting for validation. It was charting its own path. And here's where the story gets interesting, because America missed the moment when India stopped being an emerging power and started being a power. We missed the shift when India's priorities became global priorities, when its domestic policies began to influence international markets, when its decisions started to shape entire regions. We kept thinking of India as a partner in training when in fact it had become a partner in demand. This underestimation wasn't just a diplomatic misstep, it was a mindset problem. The United States has a history of underestimating nations that don't fit its traditional model of power. We did it with China in the 1980s, we did it with Southeast Asia during its economic boom, and we did it with India at a critical turning point. We assumed that because India had challenges, poverty, bureaucracy, political complexity, it couldn't possibly transform into a global force quickly. But India didn't just overcome those challenges, it turned many of them into sources of strength. Its democracy became its brand, its diversity became its resilience, its vast, young population became its engine of innovation. And because America was slow to recognize this transformation, we often engaged with India on the wrong terms. We offered deals that looked good to us but didn't respect India's sovereignty. We pushed for alignment on issues without fully appreciating India's need for strategic autonomy. We spoke of partnership but treated India like a junior player. And if there's one thing India has made clear, it's that it will not be anyone's junior partner. The result? America lost critical opportunities to shape the relationship in ways that would benefit both countries. We lost time, we lost trust. And in international diplomacy, time and trust are the most valuable currencies there are. While Washington debated, New Delhi diversified. It built stronger ties with the Gulf states, with Russia, with Southeast Asia, with Africa. It created new supply chains and energy agreements that made it less dependent on any single partner, including the United States. This was not a hostile act. India wasn't turning away from America. It was turning toward its own future, and it was saying clearly and consistently, we will engage with you as equals, not as subjects of your approval. That is a message every American policymaker should have heard years earlier. Underestimating India didn't just cost us influence, it cost us insight. Because when you underestimate someone, you stop listening to them carefully. You assume you already know what they're going to say, what they're going to do. And by the time you realize they've moved on, you're already behind. But this is also where the opportunity lies. Because moments of misjudgment can become moments of reckoning. They force you to rethink, to recalibrate, to rise to the level of the partner you want to have. And India is a partner worth rising for. The price America paid for underestimating India wasn't just geopolitical. It was psychological. We had to confront the fact that we no longer set the terms of every major decision on the global stage. And in many ways, that was the wake-up call we needed, because the future will belong to nations that treat each other with respect, with equality, with a shared sense of purpose. The sooner we embrace that, the sooner we regain our footing in a world that is no longer waiting for us to catch up. And make no mistake, India is no longer asking to be seen. It is demanding to be heard. If underestimating India was the first mistake, losing strategic influence was the consequence that followed. Because while Washington was busy second-guessing India's readiness, New Delhi was quietly and brilliantly building relationships that would change the global balance of power. And when we finally woke up, we realized something that should have been obvious all along. The center of gravity in international politics was shifting, and India was helping to move it. This is what happens when you misjudge a nation's trajectory. You don't just miss the opportunity to lead, you risk becoming a bystander. And that's exactly what America became in key moments over the last decade. Instead of being at the heart of India's diplomatic breakthroughs, we often found ourselves reacting to them after the fact. Take energy, for example. India knew its future depended on securing stable, affordable energy sources. So it went out and forged deals with countries in the Gulf, with Russia, with partners across Asia. It built its own energy security architecture. And in doing so, it reduced its dependence on any single source, including the U.S. For Washington, this was a sobering moment. We thought India's choices would align naturally with ours. But India made clear that its choices would align with its own national interest first. And that is exactly what a sovereign, confident nation should do. Or look at the way India engaged with the so-called Global South. While Washington was focused on its traditional alliances, India was building bridges with nations in Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, nations that are now emerging as critical players in shaping the next century. India's message to these countries was simple: we understand your challenges because we've lived them. We know what it takes to fight poverty, to grow an economy, to navigate the pressures of globalization. That message resonated. And suddenly, when these countries looked for leadership, they didn't just look to Washington or Beijing. They looked to New Delhi. This was not an accident. It was strategy. India recognized that influence today is not just about military power or GDP size. It is about trust. It is about shared experience. It is about being seen as a credible voice for those who have been left out of the conversation. And by the time America realized the scope of what India was doing, the network was already built. Now, let's be clear, this is not about rivalry. This is about relevance. Because when America fails to engage proactively, when we assume a key partner will always be there waiting for us, we create a vacuum. And in geopolitics, vacuums never stay empty. Someone will fill them. India stepped in to fill one of the most important vacuums of our time, the vacuum of middle power leadership. And it did so with a vision that resonated far beyond its borders. The price we paid was influence. Influence in key regional decisions, influence in setting trade norms, influence in shaping the future of energy and technology cooperation. We went from being the country that helped write the playbook to the country that sometimes has to ask what page we're on. And make no mistake, that is a position we are not used to being in, but it is also a position that can teach us something. Because influence isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn every single day through respect, through partnership, through showing up and listening. India reminded us of that. By charting its own course, it forced America to rethink how it approaches its friends, not as followers, but as equals. And that is the hard truth many in Washington had to swallow. You can't dictate terms to a nation that knows its worth. You can't expect loyalty without offering respect. You can't hold on to influence by clinging to old assumptions. The world is moving, and it will keep moving with or without us. The question we have to ask ourselves is simple. Do we want to lead in this new era? Or do we want to be surprised again and again by those who are already leading? Because the lesson here is not just about India. It's about the future of American strategy. Influence is not permanent. It's earned, it's maintained, it's renewed. And if we want to keep it, we need to be present where history is being written, not just reading about it after the ink has dried. The world has taken notice. India has taken its place, and the next move is ours, if we're bold enough to take it. If losing influence was one cost, losing economic opportunity was another, and this may be the price that stings the most. Because while Washington hesitated, while we debated, while we questioned whether India was ready to be a full partner, billions of dollars in opportunities slipped right through our fingers. And in a world where economic strength drives everything from security to diplomacy, that hesitation carried a heavy cost. India is now one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. It is not just a market, it is a force reshaping global supply chains, redefining consumer trends, and setting the pace for digital innovation. Yet for years, we treated this transformation as something that was just around the corner. as if India's economic rise was always 5 years away. That mindset cost us the first mover advantage in critical sectors where being early matters most. Think about technology. India became the back office of the world 2 decades ago, but that was just the beginning. Today, it's no longer just a hub for outsourcing, it's a hub for innovation. Its startups are building AI solutions, fintech platforms, clean energy technologies that are not only serving India, but being exported globally. And while U.S. companies are certainly present, many arrived late to the table. Others lost ground to competitors from Europe, East Asia, and yes, even China, who recognized that India was not just a place to sell to, but a place to invest in, to co-create with, to build the future alongside. And it's not just technology. Manufacturing is undergoing a seismic shift. As companies look to de-risk from overdependence on one country, India has positioned itself as a major alternative. The China Plus One strategy has been embraced by multinational corporations, and those who moved first have already locked in partnerships, land, talent, and logistics networks that will pay dividends for decades. Those who waited are now competing for whatever space is left. Energy is another piece of this puzzle. India is projected to account for one of the largest shares of energy demand growth globally over the next 20 years. That means trillions of dollars in investment in oil, gas, renewables, nuclear, and new energy technologies. When America hesitated, others stepped in. Russia supplied crude oil at discounted rates. The Gulf states signed long-term deals. Even smaller players moved quickly to secure their role in this future. By the time Washington fully engaged, the market was already reshaped, and we were negotiating from a position of catch-up rather than leadership. But perhaps the most significant economic cost was intangible. We lost mindshare. We lost some of the trust that comes when a partner shows up early, when they demonstrate confidence in your growth story, when they take a bet on you before everyone else sees the potential. When America hesitated, India noticed. And when America finally showed up, India had options. That changed the nature of the conversation. Let's be clear, India still values American investment, American technology, American collaboration, but it no longer depends on it. And that is a fundamentally different equation than the one we had 20 years ago. It means that every deal, every partnership, every negotiation is now taking place on more equal footing, which is how it should be. But it also means America can no longer rely on old assumptions of privileged access. We have to compete. We have to earn our place in the Indian market just as we do anywhere else. And competition is not a bad thing. It forces us to innovate, to bring our best, to deliver value. But make no mistake, the cost of waiting has been real. Opportunities that could have been exclusive are now crowded. Markets that could have been shaped jointly are now being shaped by others. Policies that could have been co-authored now arrive at our desk for review after the fact. This is why underestimating India was not just a diplomatic error. It was an economic miscalculation. Because the countries that bet early on India's rise are now reaping the benefits, not just in profits, but in influence. They are the ones shaping India's future standards in 5G, in semiconductors, in clean energy, in digital finance, areas that will define the next century. And here's the uncomfortable truth: we cannot buy back time. We can only decide how we act from this moment forward. Will we engage with urgency, with respect, with a sense of shared destiny? Or will we keep assuming that the next big opening will wait for us to be ready? Because the reality is simple. India's economic rise will not slow down to accommodate America's learning curve. The train has left the station, and we have a choice to make. We can be passengers on that train, partners in building the track ahead, or we can watch from the platform as others take the ride. And if we have learned anything from the past decade, it is this: the cost of hesitation is always higher than the cost of action. If losing economic opportunities was painful, the geopolitical cost was even greater, because this is where the balance of power truly began to shift. For years, America assumed that India's strategic interests would naturally align with our own. We believed that geography, democracy, and shared values would keep India squarely in our camp. But when you misjudge a nation's priorities, you create openings for others to step in, and that is exactly what happened. India is not a country that takes orders. It never has been. Its foreign policy has always been rooted in one powerful idea: strategic autonomy. That means it will work with anyone, and I mean anyone, who helps advance its national interest. Washington often struggled to understand this. We expected India to choose sides, to join coalitions, to sign on to statements that matched our view of the world. And when India didn't, we saw it as hesitation or defiance. But it wasn't. It was clarity. That clarity led India to deepen its ties with partners we weren't always comfortable with. When the West isolated Russia, India increased its oil purchases from Moscow, not to make a political statement, but to keep its economy running and its citizens supplied with affordable energy. When we urged India to take a harder line on China, New Delhi quietly strengthened its own borders, invested in its military, and pursued alliances that made sense for its security without becoming anyone's proxy. This is what a multipolar world looks like. Power is not concentrated in one capital. Influence is not dictated by a single voice. And America is no longer the automatic convener of every major decision. That is a reality we must face, not fear. Consider Bryce. For years, it was a loose economic bluff. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But look at what has happened recently. Expansion, new members, new ambitions, a push to create financial systems that rival the West's. India didn't just sit at that table. It shaped the conversation. And while Washington was busy debating whether BRICS was even relevant, India was helping turn it into a platform that gives the global South a bigger voice. Or take the G20 summit hosted by India. That was more than just a diplomatic event. It was a statement that New Delhi can convene world leaders, manage global crises, and set the agenda on everything from climate finance to debt restructuring. America wasn't sidelined. We were there, but we were no longer the only power setting the terms. For some in Washington, this was disorienting. For decades, we were used to a world where our endorsement was the ultimate seal of legitimacy. But today, nations like India are proving that they don't need our permission to lead. And the rest of the world is listening. And here's the thing, this shift does not weaken us unless we resist it. In fact, it can strengthen us if we choose to adapt. Because a world where India is stronger, where more countries share responsibility for peace and stability, is a world where America doesn't have to carry every burden alone. But that requires humility. It requires acknowledging that we cannot dictate outcomes, only shape them through partnership. When we misjudged India, we misjudged the speed with which the world would become multipolar. We assumed we had time to adjust. We assumed we could persuade India to wait for us to lead. But India didn't wait, and it shouldn't have. The global order is not static. It moves, it bends. It adapts to those who are willing to act decisively. That is why this moment matters so much. Because we are now living in the reality we once feared, a world where decisions are made in multiple capitals, not just Washington. The question is whether we will engage with that world on equal terms or cling to a past that is never coming back. The truth is, America's power was never meant to be about control. It was meant to be about possibility, about building coalitions that make the world safer, freer, more prosperous. If we return to that idea, if we approach partners like India not as junior allies, but as co-authors of the future, we will find that our influence does not shrink in a multipolar world. It expands. Because power today is not about standing above everyone else. It is about standing with those who are shaping what comes next. And if we want to be part of that story, then we need to be in the room where it is being written, not just reading the headlines the next morning. The world is not waiting for America to lead. And neither is India. Every misjudgment comes with a price, but it also comes with a lesson. And perhaps the most important lesson in this story is the one America needed most, the wake-up call. Because when a nation like India refuses to be underestimated, when it asserts its independence and reshapes the global order, it forces us to look in the mirror and ask some hard questions about who we are, how we lead, and what kind of partner we want to be. The truth is, for too long, we've assumed that American leadership was automatic, that we could set the rules and the rest of the world would follow. That because we had the biggest economy, the strongest military, the most powerful alliances, we could afford to take our time. But India has shown us something different, that leadership is not something you inherit. It is something you earn every day through credibility, respect, and consistency. And that is where this becomes not just a story about India, but a story about us. Because if we want to regain our footing, If we want to maintain our influence in a world that is moving faster than ever, we need to do more than play catch up. We need to evolve. We need to understand that partnership today means co-creation, not prescription. It means listening before speaking. It means showing up early, not after the deals have already been signed. It means recognizing that when a country like India stands up and says, "We will do what is best for us," that is not a threat. That is a sign of maturity. It is a sign that our partners are ready to carry more of the burden, to contribute more to the shared future we say we want. But here is the other truth. If we fail to adjust, if we cling to old habits and outdated assumptions, we will keep paying the price, not just with lost opportunities, but with lost relevance. The rest of the world is watching. They are measuring us not just by what we say, but by how we act. And when they see us ignoring rising powers, dismissing their priorities, or trying to pull them into a past they have outgrown, they look elsewhere for leadership. India has given us a gift, even if it didn't feel like one at first. It has reminded us that we are not entitled to be the center of the world. We have to earn that place by being worthy of it. And that means reimagining what leadership looks like in a multipolar century. It means forging economic partnerships that are mutually beneficial, not one-sided. It means collaborating on technology, on clean energy, on security, not as the senior partner dictating terms, but as equals designing the future together. It means respecting India's independence while recognizing that independence is not the same as distance. We can stand shoulder to shoulder without standing in the same place on every issue. This wake-up call should not scare us. It should inspire us. Because the United States has always been at its best not when it clings to old hierarchies, but when it reinvents itself to meet the moment. That is how we built the alliances that won the Cold War. That is how we rebuilt Europe after World War II. That is how we led the fight against AIDS, how we spearheaded the response to natural disasters, how we created a global order that, for all its flaws, lifted billions out of poverty. We can do it again. We must do it again, but only if we are willing to see India and the world as it is, not as it was. This is not just about diplomacy. This is about who we are as a nation. Are we the country that waits for the future to happen to us? Or are we the country that steps up, that engages, that partners with others to shape a future worthy of the next generation? Because make no mistake, history is being written right now. The world is not slowing down, and neither is India. The only question is whether we will be part of the story or just a footnote in someone else's. The wake-up call has already been rung. The world has heard it. India has answered it. And now it is our turn.